Hi, everyone. I'm Liz Harrow, partner at Shakti. We're an early stage venture capital firm. Welcome to Shakti Pulse, where we bring insights from industry titans for the benefit of startup founders. Today, we're so grateful to have Mindy Grossman joining us for a conversation about navigating layoffs in today's economy. Mindy brings deep insights and experience, having most recently served as president and CEO at WW International, and as a highly accomplished executive in industries ranging from fashion to health and wellness to media. Mindy is also a valued Shakti Titan and LP in our fund. So Mindy, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
No, it's great to be here and to be having, conversations about what's very relevant and critical to what's happening in a very uncertain environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And to start, Mindy, can you give us a brief overview of your background and your experience as a CEO and leader in various organizations?
Sure. As you mentioned, I started my career in fashion in the menswear business, ultimately working for designers such as Tommy Hilfiger, Ralph Lauren, um, headed up design and merchandising for Tommy, became president of Chaps Ralph Lauren, ran new business development, did the start of Polo Jeans Company in my first CEO role. That company ended up building very quickly and got acquired by Jones New York. And I ended up joining Phil Knight when he came back into Nike to bring on a new executive team. I ran their global apparel business. I started their first women's leadership council. And after 6 years of doing a crazy commute between New York and Portland, Oregon, and being out of the country about 30% of the time, but it was fantastic. I joined Barry Diller to take over IAC Retail, which was at the time Home Shopping Network and a portfolio of catalog business, multi-billion-dollar direct-to-consumer portfolio. To do a turnaround, I was the eighth CEO in 10 years, and ended up spinning it out and taking it public in August 2008. So we'll come back to that. Thought that might have been my last crisis, but we've all lived through a lot over the past couple of years. Took the company public, grew it, and ended up between IAC and being public as HSNI 11 years. And then decided to make another shift and really was passionate about the health and wellness business. And when Oprah decided to partner with WeightWatchers to really evolve the business into a more holistic approach to overall health and wellness, including weight loss, I joined to do that transformation. And then since last March, I am now with a high level CEO and advisory and investment firm, um, working across industries, businesses, and with very different CEO and teams on how they're all navigating through this environment and how we can kind of be an asset to them as they're maneuvering that.
Very, very timely. And Mindy, you mentioned your experience, both public and private companies. And when it comes to layoffs, how does the approach differ between publicly traded companies and a private company?
I think what we need to talk about first is how do you manage that no matter what company you're in, whether you're a startup or whether you're a very mature company. I think there's some really key things that have to be thought about. Um, I think one of the main things is you really have to be sure that you are thinking not only of the teams and the individuals you have to lay off, but you have to think equally about the people that are going to be staying, because how you manage that is going to affect them. And knowing we were having this conversation, I looked at a couple of surveys that have come out. And if you look at kind of what I call layoff survivors, right? 41% decrease in job satisfaction, 36% decrease in organizational commitment, 20% decrease in job performance, and higher turnover. So I think it's really important that we're having these conversations. We have to handle the layoff itself. And by the way, layoffs come for different reasons. They're not only because of economic issues, sometimes there's structural issues or changing in strategy. You have to be thinking of the whole and what you're going to do to move forward. Um, so I think it's really important that you take the time to really think across how you're doing it. I think the other really important thing is you have to ensure that you handle with care, you don't diminish people, that you allow dignity. And granted, it's hard. I mean, when you have to do a layoff of 2,500 people, 3,000 people at once, it's not an easy task. And in many cases, they're not even all in the same location or parts of the world. Um, and the how can't be exactly the same for every company. Um, but you have to really take into consideration what is going to do best for the employees you're laying off and what is going to do best for the employees that are staying. And I always like to say it's not the what, it is the how. You're not just the CEO, right? You're the chief communications officer, you're the chief crisis officer, and you're the chief hope officer. And you have to make sure you're taking all of those into consideration because everyone is watching you. Everyone is watching you and how you're handling it. And what could often seem like nuance can actually be very important. And you have to handle it with care.
Mindy, if possible, are there any real life examples that you can share at times where you think layoffs, whether your own company or others, were handled effectively and times that they weren't, and what really made the difference?
So I'll give you a couple of perspectives. And when you and I talked about this from our very first conversation, I said, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I have been recognized for doing it so well, and I have been vilified, rightly or wrongly, in other circumstances. So I do have a perspective. So to give you an example, when I got to uh, IAC retail. I had to literally relaunch the entire business. I had to assess the culture and the company. And there were changes I had to make because I had a certain ilk of employee that was really more of a toxic employee. This was a turnaround, but I was very honest with the organization right when I got there. And I said, I know what's going to happen. I am the eighth CEO in 10 years, and you're just waiting for the next one to go. But there's going to be three type of people. The people that are the evangelists. They're excited that I'm here. I'm going to do something different. There are the people who are going to wait and see, and I respect that, but at some point you have to be on the bus. And the people who are going to be toxic blockers. That's not going to work. And you have individual conversations with people who aren't supporting what it is you need to do to build the business. So that's one circumstance. Circumstance two, we took the company public in August '08, 2 weeks before the Lehman bankruptcy and the crisis. And we had some really hard decisions to make. I was a first time public company CEO. I had a new board I had not worked with before. Our business was on an excellent trajectory, but we had to recognize what was happening in that environment. And we had to make some tough choices. What were we going to continue to invest in to use our capital? And where were we going to have to make changes? And we did have to make some changes because we needed talent in different areas than where the business might not have been prior to be able to manage the whole. And we were able to have one on one conversations. We gave people the opportunity to get counseling, to get job support. Um, We handled it as effectively as we could have, and we articulated why this was about shifts in need, not just the environment. And I think that was important. The second thing, that as soon as I made a change, I immediately, after having those conversations, did a town hall and communicated to the entire organization what was happening and why, and how we were treating the individuals and the support that they were being given. Because what we all have to remember is every one of our employees goes home at night and they have neighbors and they go over for a barbecue, whatever it is. And someone says, "Who do you work for?" or "Who did you work for?" And you want people to communicate if they're still there, right? They're proud to be there. If they're not there, it was handled in the best way possible. And I think as CEOs, that's what we have to aim for. And I always say, when I put my head on the pillow at night, and as hard as it may have been, do I believe that I did things in the best interest of the individual, the organization, and for the future? And that's what you have to use. And no one's perfect. And, you will have, times where you go, maybe I could have done this a little better or that. And then my last example was, when we entered 2020 at WW, going to have the biggest year in the company's history. We had just come off a 3-month, 10-city tour with Oprah. 20, 40,000 people in an arena every weekend. And our finale was March 7th in Denver. On March 10th, it basically had to shut down not just our office business, but we had 30,000 physical meetings a week in 13 different countries. And we had to decide what we were going to do. Fortunately, I had an incredible technology and product team and operations team. And I said, we can't leave our members without support. I called Eric Wan at Zoom, and at 6 days, we converted every one of those meetings to virtual with a meeting finder, etc. And we went virtual. However, as time went on and we could not open any of those locations, we realized that we were going to have to restructure the mix of our business, even coming out of COVID. And we were going to have to make changes to our coach organization and our guide or receptionist conversation. And we spent a lot of time in real depth thinking about this. And so we did make changes that affected about 1,500 plus people with a very significant organization. We had a leader have a conversation. It was not video Zoom, but it was a conversation with a group no larger than 30, and then they would have a one-on-one conversation in time after. And that's what we did. We did all the work. I also made a decision that if I was going to affect even one person, I was going to affect myself. So I informed the board I was going to defray my entire salary for the foreseeable future. And, we did what we have to do. Well, as much as you think you do everything right, one of the, or a couple of the people decided to go after every publication. Nobody would take the story and then one editor took the story. And I say it's because they wanted, Oprah or something in the headline. And they came out with an article that we did not handle it appropriately and it was biased. And I remember being, so devastated because we did everything we need to do. But the first thing I did was immediately call a town hall and say, I'm not being defensive, but I just want to explain everything that has transpired, what we are doing, how we are doing it, what we're learning. And that's what I think was important. You can't hide, right? We're all doing difficult things in these environments, especially I spend a lot of time with entrepreneurs in more startup situations, or situations where you've been pushed for growth, for growth, for growth. And then the world turns and you're being pushed for a different purview as it relates to profitability or the bottom line. And you have to sit back and go, what am I now going to do? Because you want to build your business for the long term. So it all goes back to, it's not the what, it's the how. How are you treating people? How are you thinking about them? And how are you being transparent and communicating as best as possible in real time what is happening?
And Mindy, you mentioned you mentor a lot of entrepreneurs, and a lot of our founders are very early on in their journey, seed, series A. Some of them have never been through a layoff process. And so from a more tactical perspective, for an early stage entrepreneur deciding that they need to go through this layoff process, what are some of the best practices in order to set that process in motion in an effective way?
Well, I think a couple of things. And again, everything is different. What is the strategic reason for what it is you have to do? Two, who is your trusted partner? Who can you be talking to as you're going through this? Who do you trust? I mean, fortunately, look at the team you have at Shakti, and how do you utilize those voices that perhaps have more experience going through this? And I don't think it's a time to say, well, I just have to do everything. You want to get that feedback. You want to have that trusted advice. And then, of course, you have to decide what to do, what you think is right for your business at whatever stage. Really do the work around what the business needs are. Give yourself some runway. You don't want to have to make this an ongoing, because then your entire organization is going to live with uncertainty, and that's an anathema to moving forward. So I think you really have to think about it in those terms, and make sure you're doing the best to preserve your culture.
That's a great point. I think often founders are, afraid to cut deep early on, but to your point, then there is that lingering uneasiness throughout the organization. So, Mindy, any other best practices, good, bad, or ugly, on the layoff process?
So I would just go back to, the original conversation. You have to sit back, you have to know your culture, you have to really look inwards and say, what is truly the right thing? Because you want a sustainable, successful business. And it's not easy to do the hard things. But what a lot of people aren't thinking about is a lot of these things happen in some cases when your business is doing really well, because you've had a shift in strategy or because you're divesting of something. So no matter what the circumstance, the rules apply. Maybe different, but the same rules apply, and I think that's really important.
We believe that effective mentorship in the early stages of a company can greatly impact its success, especially in situations such as these with layoffs and other business decisions. And as someone who's a seasoned advisor to CEOs, what is your opinion on this? And what are some of the ways for a CEO to continually develop and grow in their new role?
I always say that the best thing you can do is, have a network of support that you can reach out to at any time. And you can do that at any point in your business cycle, because you're just going to learn. And then you find what is right for you even though some of the basic premises always have to exist.
That's great advice. Well, thank you, Mindy, for being part of today's episode. And thank you to our viewers for tuning in to Shakti Pulse.
Well, thank you for having me. And I think it's really important not just to have the conversations about when things go great, but to really have the conversations where you have challenges and you want to do the best for your team and for your business.